Okay, welcome. So in this lesson or presentation, I wanted to look into the Hermetic Qabalah, so the tree of life in Hermeticism in Western Hermetic Qabalah, and I'm going to explain what it is in case you don't know. And more specifically into the masculine feminine and working with feminine energies in Hermetic Qabalah. So this is going to be a theoretical presentation. Obviously, I'm not going to teach you any specific practices or guided meditations, or if you are looking for super powerful magic spells of feminine magic, according to Hermetic Qabalah, then you're not going to find it here. But we will look into it, into these concepts and kind of this particular worldview, the structure of reality that Hermetic Qabalah presents, and how does, if at all, feminine magic fit in there, and what is feminine magic, right? So basically the interplay of the feminine and Hermetic Qabalah. So, and this is going to be PowerPoint presentation. So let me begin, right? So this, then we will call it feminine practices in Hermetic Qabalah, right? So this is an interesting topic as such, because I don't know how much you know about Hermeticism, but as such, it's a very left-brained structure of the world. I'm going to talk about what Hermetic Qabalah is, how it's different from the Jewish Kabbalah, what is Kabbalah, and etc. But it's a very structural view of reality. If you know Rosicrucianism and the Hermeticism, the Golden Dawn, etc., the occult, a lot of it is based on ritual, on prescriptive magic, let's say. There is a linear path where you go from A to B, where in order to get to B, you have to do this and this and this. And if you don't do this and this and this in a consecutive order, then you are not getting to B. And so there is and even the structure of the world, the view of the world is very, let's say, masculine, very left-brained, very oriented towards the shortest distance between A and B being the straight line, whereas the feminine principle goes a little bit in circles and spirals. So these are some of the questions that I was hoping to look into. So how are feminine magic, magnetism, yin energy, and specifically feminine practices viewed in Hermetic Qabalah, in those Western occult teachings? Does a concept of feminine practices even exist? And what can this system teach us about interaction between the masculine and feminine? Perhaps about our own construct of the feminine as such. What does the feminine mean in the context of Hermetic teachings? And if you're wondering at all, well, what is, Hermetic teachings? Well, your beloved, tarot cards, such as Rider-Waite and Thoth Tarot, they are based on Hermetic Qabalah specifically. And a lot of it is based also on those alchemical principles of, integrating the masculine and the feminine. Now, It's an interesting, of course, it's a whole PhD, right? And it can take, a 50-hour course with in-depth discussion and reading sources and, group study and so on. So this is just a brief introduction where I kind of wanted to present the basic principles. I just wanted to say that really the Hermetic Qabalah, as we know it now, and I studied it in Eastern European offshoot, so non-Western and non-English speaking school of Hermeticism. So what I know may be slightly different, and the tree of life that I use, again, I'm going to talk about it in a moment. The tree of life that I use is also slightly different from what you know if you, for example, worked with the Golden Dawn tree of life. But the Hermetic Qabalah, as we know it now, it really was the most influenced by the Golden Dawn, of course, a short-lived but incredibly influential occult order, right, from the UK. And that order and several other similar movements that emerged, they all emerged post-industrial revolution. After the world became much more, and prior to industrial revolution, there were, other philosophical teachings, philosophies. There was a movement, so both through the philosophies and through the arrival of this industrial age, a movement into a more mechanical world, a more mechanical view of reality. So the world became mechanical, right? There was electricity. Suddenly nobody lived within, a few decades. You could move from, of course, the universal electricity took a while to arrive, right? And in some places it only arrived after World War II. But suddenly there was this possibility of not following the cycles of the moon and the stars, and you could extend your working days, and you could write at night, and it was so incredible, right? The fact that it messed up with circadian rhythms and with health and mental health of population was a different story, but suddenly man had control over nature, right? And all of this resulted in a worldview that is somewhat mechanical, that kind of lacks that spirit and dance and mystery, and the magic of the sunrise and the magic of the moonrise. Now we're going to conquer nature. Now we are going to conquer reality, right? So dialectic materialism and the fact that everything is matter, right? That there is no spirit, and etc. So this, I see it as a consequence, really, of industrial age. And while Hermetic teachings and Kabbalah precede those, of course, most come really from the medieval period, the Renaissance, the interpretation that exists, that we have from our teachers of Hermetic Qabalah that we know nowadays, the interpretation, it comes from this post-industrial revolution age. So it has a mechanical worldview at the core of it. It's a spiritual philosophy. Yes, it's a way of explaining the world. Yes, but these structures that we talk about in Hermeticism, they came about in the context of an increasingly mechanical world, right? There was little spontaneity. So this is something to keep in mind, in my opinion, because most of the, occult practices and books that people are into nowadays, they have this slightly mechanical interpretation. And maybe the books, when they were written like 500 years ago or 600 years ago, 800 years ago, the authors had faith and mystery and flow, and they were, well, we have to put it something, to define it as something. Words, they both define, but they also limit. The authors may have had spontaneity and the flow and new things, but the interpretation that modern followers or teachers, or we even as people have nowadays, is very different. It's much more mechanical. Oh, so I put whatever it is, right? I don't know, sage and mint together, boil them for 5 minutes, and then this concoction will do this and that, right? I don't really bother about connecting to the spirit of the plant and talking to mint and sage and cultivating my relationship with them, because that's out of the window. That's not part of our reality. And I view it as this consequence, so kind of seeing in context. Whereas, of course, feminine practices, they are rooted in older traditions. So there is a contradiction, somewhat. So let's explore a little further. Right. So Hermetic Qabalah. Let's start at the, and I'm sure most of you have seen the Tree of Life. So this is the Jewish Tree of Life, the Hebrew Tree of Life, which is a map of reality and is used by Kabbalists in Judaism. There are 10 spheres, right? As you have, from the crown going down all the way to Malchut, to the root, to the kingdom. And there are pathways connecting those spheres. Here in the center, a sphere that is not marked, the 11th sphere is Da'at. Now, Da'at is the hidden sphere of knowledge. It also represents the abyss, as I'm going to talk about in a moment. And Da'at is hidden, but it's that secret knowledge. There is always something that has to be hidden. Right. So the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, we start with the root. Well, what does it all mean? Right. So Kabbalah in Hebrew, it is something that is received. The root is these 3 letters. Modern day Hebrew uses the root. It's K, B, and L, right? It's mitkabel, for example, to receive. I'm receiving, right? So the root means also in modern day Hebrew receiving. In Hebrew and Arabic, the basis is 3 letters. And that root can then be modified in different ways. So Kabbalah is basically something that is received. And by the legend says that it's an oral tradition that was originally given to Moses and was transmitted from master to student. So in most teachings, in most traditions, religious or otherwise, not religious or folk traditions, we have a written material, something that is for everyone, and we have esoteric so-called teaching. So Kabbalah would be an esoteric teaching. What does esoteric mean? It means hidden, right? So something that is not for everyone, not necessarily because of any elitism, but because simply not everyone is interested. Not everyone asks questions as to how or why. And some people are just content with, what to do. How do I get from A to B? What should I do? What I shouldn't do, right? What path should I choose? Should I marry this guy or that guy? And that's it. Whereas some people will always be questioning and searching. And so those will look for a teacher, a spiritual teacher, to advance their practice, to connect more fully with themselves and with the divine. And so it's for those esoteric traditions. And so this is then the Jewish esoteric tradition. So a Kabbalist would be someone who is a receiver of the secret knowledge, Sod, the secret, right? Now, tradition says that Kabbalah was something, it was part of the revelation received by Moses on Mount Sinai, right? He wrote the Ten Commandments. There was the written Torah, which is studied extensively and is part of both Jewish and Christian holy scriptures. But there was also hidden knowledge, the secret. And that was transmitted by Moses to his students, and etc., from student to student, right? From teacher to student throughout centuries. Now, in the 13th century, Moses de Leon writes a book called Zohar, and he attributes it to a 2nd century rabbi who reputedly received this revelation in a cave. Revelations, as you know, are often received in a cave. Cave, by the way, is a symbol, of course, of the divine feminine. It's a womb, right? It's the dark place where you go, you bury yourself, you gestate for a while, so you don't see the light, you don't maybe eat or drink, you are in an altered state of consciousness, and then you exit the cave, you are transformed, right? So you could say Jesus was buried in a cave, right, and then rose again on the 3rd day. Incidentally, it's a woman who anoints him and who is the first witness of his resurrection. So a cave is a symbol of the divine feminine. And there is lots of it in Kabbalah. Well, but most people would say that, okay, scientifically, the Zohar by De Leon is probably a medieval forgery. It wasn't really written by a 2nd century rabbi, and De Leon was famous for forging things. But however, that the book has never been written before doesn't mean that those teachings didn't exist, and that, they were just invented randomly out of the blue in a dream. Because, of course, those currents and those teachings, they existed elsewhere. In fact, there were some researchers who studied the interaction of both Jewish and Islamic mysticism, Sufism, and Kabbalistic Judaism, mystical Judaism. They proposed that one influenced another, and very often it was actually the Kabbalists who were influenced by Islamic mystical teachings. For example, Ibn Arabi, a 12th, 13th century Islamic mystic, he actually wrote before De Leon. And a lot of his teachings parallel Kabbalah, but that is, of course, a whole different story. Now, the basis of the teaching, right, is that we have 10 spheres, which are like 10 emanations of the divine source. So it's like a map of reality. God comes down from the invisible realm, which is the crown, from the unknowable, unexplicable, right? The source, that the unmanifest. And the pathway of manifestation is through this tree. So this tree is kind of like a map. How does the unmanifest become manifest? So it's about God, it's about, how the spirit descends, it's about human, it's about the pathway of an idea, of an intention. For example, I want to write a book. Well, how do I make it manifest? Well, according to this map of reality, it goes from the unmanifest, it has to cross the abyss of the dot, has to go down, 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 and by the time it gets down, it's something very different than what it was there at the inception stage. Well, because that's the nature of reality. But so basically, we have this map. And the origin of the map is that the divine descended or scattered into pieces. And now our work is to restore those fragments of the divine, to separate light from darkness, so to speak, to purify darkness and restore them back to the divine. And this work is called the Tikkun. Just very, very briefly on the Jewish Kabbalah. Of course, it's an incredibly big topic. Now, however, as you noticed, I use the spelling of the Kabbalistic tree of life, of the Kabbalah, but I also use the spelling of Kabbalah here with a Q. And that is to distinguish, because in my opinion, and in the opinion of many occultists or researchers or tarologists, etc., that the Jewish Kabbalah is something completely different from the Hermetic Qabalah, from the Kabbalah, right? Because that is a Christianized reality. So Kabbalah would refer to the blending of Jewish Kabbalah with Christian theology, especially during European Renaissance. And specifically, there was around 13th century when it became very popular. So, of course, when they started reading that book by Moses de Leon, right, the Zohar, wow, Jewish mysticism came from Moses. So we can use that to show that actually Christianity has the same. We are the same, right? So we have something in common. We can work together, and so we can also build bridges between Judaism and Christianity, or looked from another perspective, we can convert the Jews to Christianity. So let's have a look here to the on the to the left. We have Jewish version of the tree of life, superimposed also on the human body. And this version has the dot as part of the tree of life. So there are 11 spheres. So we will have the crown, right, the first sephira, and then we will have so looking to the right, for some reason there it is. For some reason I couldn't find my pointer. So we have the crown, the keter, we have the right pillar and the left pillar as seen from us, from the receiver. We have the center pillar, right? We have, and it goes from up to down. So the crown would be the unmanifest world. It would be the highest divine emanation. And then it goes down. So from the pathway from the divine to the reality goes from up to down. Now, of course, when we evolve, the pathway will go from down to up. So the most dense dimension would be the kingdom, the Malkut, right? And then it goes up. Now this hidden sphere, dot, it means knowing, and possibly, if you're interested in Hermetic Qabalah, you want to know things. It's a lot, and it's a Western, specifically Western attitude to knowing. I'm just going to read, 20 books, 50 articles, and now I will know things. And that's, I think, also an attitude that many bring into the occultism, for example, or those particular practices. And I want to know things. I want to know how to fix, right? How to fix my health, how to fix my money, fix my relationship. And then gradually dawns on us that we're talking about a completely different kind of knowing. So that, for example, in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, and in the Christian Bible, although most Christians don't read in Hebrew, that means to know in a very intimate sense. It is the knowing that is used for sexual relations. So when you have in the Bible, and he knew his wife, right? And he came to know his wife. That's the word, dat. He came to know his wife. So he knew her. He received that knowledge. So to know someone is to have from this word, right? Meaning that to have a dat of someone would be to have sexual relation with that person, right? It's that kind of knowing. Obviously, you can't really have a sexual relationship with an unmanifest source, but it indicates that kind of a relationship, which is very intimate, which is as close as it gets, which pierces, which goes even deeper than sexual relationship, because it gets into your body, right? So it is embodied. That knowledge is embodied. You feel it in your bones, and with your body, not with your mind. With your heart, with your blood, with your bones, with your gut, with your feeling, with your tears, right? It's part of your food, part of your water. It's that knowledge. And that is the knowledge that we're talking about, actually, in terms of the tree of life and the Kabbalah. So yes, it's secret knowledge, but it is that knowledge. It is sexual knowledge. And of course, the best metaphor that both Kabbalists and Sufi mystics, for example, Rumi, well known, the best metaphor they could use for this knowledge is sex, because how else are you going to explain it, right? It's that intimate knowledge, but it's not about sex. And it can be, because everything is connected. So the Kabbalistic tree of life, then, in Judaism, that's from a Jewish teacher, Sarah Yehudit Schneider, and that's from her book, You Are What You Hate. And this is then the tree of life superimposed on the human frame, let's say the body. So the crown is kind of above. It's actually above the crown chakra. It's not in the physical body, because it's outside the knowable reality. So that sphere is not included in the human body, let's say. But on the right-hand side, you will see a Hermetic, the Western occult tree of life, with the hidden dot here. But as you see, those pathways will be a little different. The flaming sword of the Hebrew tree of life is a little bit different. Here in the Western tree, dot is simply in the middle of this pathway, right? And from the sphere Tiferet, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pathways going out. So 8 different choices to select from beauty, right? So it's so this is the tree of life that we know from Western occultism, from the Golden Dawn, and from the previous teachings, right, all the way to that 13th century Catholic version, right, that tried to convert the Jews. And so in the Western tree of life, those spheres are also superimposed on the human body. There is talk about, them being physically in the body. For example, the cross, right, that Kabbalistic cross that is used as part of the pentagram ritual to protect against entities. There is a really horrible version on YouTube with the wrong pronunciation. But it uses these spheres, right? Because they are located on the shoulders, the Gevura and Chesed. But in the modern Hermetic Qabalah, the location is slightly different in that they put the Malchut as the root chakra, right? So the kingdom, the Malchut is at the root, and then the Yesod, the foundation, would be at the sacral chakra level, and the Hod and Netzach approximately at the solar plexus. So slightly different distribution in the body. And Tiferet is at the heart chakra, and the Chesed and Gevura at the throat, and then you will have the Bina and Chochma at the Ajna chakra, and the Keter above the Sahasrara chakra, above the crown chakra, actually. But the crown, even that word, the crown, right, it comes from this representation. So there is a very close intersection of the tree of life and, how Westerners approach the chakra system. Right. So to go back then, to reiterate. So here on the left is the Tree of Life by Athanasius Kircher. He was a Jesuit priest who actually drew his version of the Tree of Life as part of his work in converting Jews. So to repeat then, the Kabbalah with a Q will refer here as a Western version, westernized. Yes, it has roots in the Jewish Kabbalah, but it's not Jewish, right? It developed from it. It took the system and worked with it. And so one of the most notable differences is the way those pathways are created. Also, the pathways in the Jewish system, they had letters. Yes, letters were corresponding to numbers. But in the Western occultism, something much more interesting happens. Here, the pathways not only have numbers, but they become correspondent eventually with tarot cards. So we actually have the 22 pathways, yes. And in the Golden Dawn system, they started then connecting them to the tarot cards, although those concepts, they existed before. So the major arcana of tarot, they represent in that system. The major arcana represent those pathways connecting the spheres. The spheres themselves are consisting, or let's put it the other way, the court cards and the minor arcana, so the numbers, right, in the tarot cards, they are a representation of a particular sphere, right, of that sephira. So we have something that, you know, that was new, because in the Jewish system, tarot cards didn't exist, right? And so in Hermetic Kabbalah, they don't really talk so much about God either. God is the creator. It's more a system. So it is this mechanical worldview and gradually becomes more and more mechanical. Nowadays, the modern teachers, and like the school that I studied was, they talk about the system. So the system does that, the system wants that, right? So now you would notice there are different trees of life. I, for example, work with a version of the tree of life that is exactly the same as the version drawn by Kircher, which was surprising. In terms of numbers, the numbers of the pathways and which arcana of tarot to use. But it is very different from the Golden Dawn version and from the Aleister Crowley's version. And of course, it's different from the original Jewish version. So why, like, what is the validity then of a system that can't even agree on the pathways? And there is the 10 spheres and the hidden 11th sphere. And where do the pathways go? The Jews, you know, draw them one way, then the Western Kabbalists draw them the other way. So what's the core here? What's the point of it, right? And I like to remember a parable about the blind men who were asked to describe an elephant, and one of them, said, "Oh, it's." He grabbed the tail, and he said, "Oh, it's like a rope with fringes at the bottom." And one of them grabbed the ear and said, "Oh, it's something that is huge and thin, and it's moving." And then one of them grabbed the leg and said, "Oh, the elephant is like a pillar." Right. And so that's basically what we do. Truth is, it's not really just about Hermetic Kabbalah or anything else. It's any system, any religious or spiritual system that we may choose to work with. Inevitably, we're all like blind people with an elephant trying to describe an elephant, because the reality is, of course, so much bigger. Now, it was never the proposition that this is the only way to describe reality, or that's the only thing that exists in reality. It's a map, right? And like every map, it can be more detailed or less detailed. And different creators choose to focus on different things, on different aspects of the map. So that is how the tree of life is different, because inevitably, of course, the reality is bigger than 10 spheres or 11 spheres or 22 pathways, and whether this is pathway number 3 or pathway number 2 is possibly not so important. But it has a lot to say. When you actually choose one structure to work with, you work with that structure, and you work with everyone else who works in that structure, and that's how you evolve, right? So the important part is choosing and sticking to one path that you chose, and then perhaps develop your own structure. So this is the tree of life that I work with. And that I was working with like for the past 5 years or so, right? Not that it's my primary map of reality, but in terms of tarot and in terms of some meditations that I would use, that is the tree of life that I was taught to work with. It's not the Hermetic the Golden Dawn version, because in the Golden Dawn, the arcana have different numbers. So this, for example, would be the third arcana, the Empress. in the Golden Dawn, and here it's the fourth pathway, right? And in my version, this is the third pathway, and in their version, it will be the second. It will be the high priestess, but we're not going to go into those details, but just to bring attention to the fact that this is the representation that I work with, and that's the corresponding chakras of the human body. Now, so the Hermetic Tree of Life, first of all, it is divided into masculine and feminine. So it has the left pillar, which is called the pillar of severity. Here, this is the one. So if we go from above, so we go, this is Bina. Here you have a representation also of which tarot cards are used. The numbers here are the Golden Dawn numbers, right? So, and that would be the tarot arcana that are that are used. My tree of life would be different. So, but if we look at the structure first, so because the structure is the same across all versions. So on the left, if we go from the top, we have Bina, we have Gevura, and we have Hod. And this is the feminine, the left-hand path, of course. Severity, Gevura. That is the two wings. Remember when they talk about the two wings, to balance compassion, kindness, and mercy with structure, right? With strength. That would be the left wing. That would be the wing of strength, the Gevura, right? So it's the feminine. Now notice that the feminine in the Hermetic Tree of Life is the one that has severity, that has strength. The Great Mother. Here, the second arcana, you have a picture of the High Priestess. That is the left pillar of the Tree of Life, the Boaz, the dark pillar, the Black Madonna, if you like. The Dark Mother, Kali, the Destroyer. That feminine is concretizing. It is structural. This is the yin, the feminine, the unseen. It's the negative electric charge. It's the destructive forces, the left-hand path. The middle pillar is the pillar that is balancing polarities, right? It's corresponding to the central channel of the body, whereas the feminine pillar would correspond to the left hand and the left side of the body. The middle pillar is the power cable for transmission of astral light. It is the balance between mind and magic. The magic would be the feminine. The mind would be the masculine. Magic would be black, yes, but there is no black magic. There are dark intentions. And so these are then the pathways that go either from the source down and from the humanity, from the earth up, depending on what you want to achieve. So then the right-hand side is the pillar of mercy. The Father, the Great Father, the Divine Masculine is merciful, right? So the picture of the strict Father and the kind, giving, loving Mother who is who always gives and always cleans and doesn't say a word and produces 25 children and then dies of breast cancer because she's given, right? And nobody else gave her anything in return. That picture obviously doesn't fit here, because we have the pillar of mercy, the right-hand side, it's the Father. That's the Yahim pillar on the right-hand side of the high priestess, the white pillar. So this is yang, this is active, this is external. Positive electric charge, creative forces. Now, of course, whether we have positive or negative electric charge, we have to unite them, right, to make things work. So it doesn't matter. The high priestess unites the left and the right? The high priestess unites the masculine and the feminine. And that is the great work, uniting polarities. So in this tree of life, the polarities are in their pure form, but in reality, everything is mixed, right? Otherwise, it's not working. If your battery is only plus, it's not working. So in order for the current to go, in order for the organism to be alive, in order for the earth to function, for the whole system to work, we need the uniting of those polarities. So the great work then is seeking the middle path that balances the polarities. And here also we have this hidden Sephirah Da'at, which is in Hermeticism the abyss between the unmanifest and the manifest world, between the transcendent and the immanent, right? Okay. How does feminine magnetism and yin magic fit here? But I think we started on that already. So that left-hand path, the structural feminine. Interestingly, indeed, there is nothing in Hermetic Qabalah or Kabbalah that gives the feminine any form of weakness or frivolity. On the other hand, it's the constricting. But it's also associated with evil, with darkness, with Lilith and the tree of Klipot. That's your favorite subject of the channel of Lucifer and the dark matter and the anti-world, because it's exactly that. In Hermetic tradition, the feminine, the yin, is actually the dark side. It's not a dual system, so we kind of have to reprogram, maybe reassess what darkness and light means, because darkness is, after all, the source of everything. The womb is dark. So this is the yin channel. That's where it becomes important, where I say that I work with this particular system, because, for example, in the Golden Dawn tree of life, this would be the second arcanum, the high priestess. But in the system that I work with, it's the impress, the third pathway, right? So then that's the system that I personally work with and that I know. So this is the yin channel in the tree of life. Alternatively, you can also look at the left-hand path, right, as the yin channel. In any case, the yin channel is also the route, the gateway to the anti-world, to the tree of Klipot. Now, Klipot are, they come from the Lurianic Kabbalah, from the Hebrew, the Jewish Kabbalah. Klipot are like shells or husks that veil the holiness of God. You could maybe call them the dark matter, but it's more like a shell, like there is a seed, right? And it has a shell. Now, this is interesting because the yin, as you saw, that left-hand pillar, it is constricting, it is the force, right? It is limiting, it is the left-hand side, it is dark. And actually, the yin in the Hermetic Qabalah is constricting and structural. It is a shell. It is a husk. So, for example, the function of the yang is to give and to expand, right? So, by its own, it expands. It just gives. It doesn't have a form. It's energy. So, for example, if we have an apple, and so yang would be. I'm not very good at philosophy, but I think there is a very famous philosophical idea in terms of, you know, the kind of the general idea of an apple and the actual specific apple. So yang would be that general idea. It would be the concept of apple, right? It's matter, the nature of apple, right? It's the taste, the understanding what apple is, etc. Whereas yin would be the apple peel, the boundary of that physical apple. Without yin, this apple would just float into space, right? There would be nothing to constrict it. So, of course, in every reality, in every organism, in every being, in everything, every matter, every created thing, yin and yang are together in different proportions. They don't exist separately. Pure yin is like a vortex or a black hole. The source within the human body, pure yin is considered to be inside the woman's womb. And it's like a black hole that is connected to the center of the earth, which is energetically a black hole. And this black hole is the source of a vortex that attracts partners, for example, sexual partners. The stronger the vortex, the stronger this yin center in the woman, the stronger the power of keeping partners. And yin center in the womb, it also attracts the souls of children. But as you can see, this channel, the yin channel, it goes from approximately heart chakra, from here, this corresponds to the heart chakra, and all the way up to the crown and out of the physical body. So it's actually not womb. It's from the crown up, so it's the upper half of the body, if we were to position it onto the physical body. But kind of abstractly speaking, it is then that channel that sucks in the soul of a child and then pulls it downwards. So it is this area here in my version of Kabbalah, represented by the 15th arcanum, the devil, that is actually responsible for, you know, for manifestation, for the actual manifesting of a child and partner and money and etc. But just to keep you at the yin channel here, so this is that yin channel, the absolute yin, the dark matter. And so at the root of this channel then is the gateway to the anti-world, the klipot. So it is that sucking in force, the peel. And the tree of klipot is also associated with the Luciferian channel and the bad magic, the dark magic. The problem with the channel of Lucifer and etc. is that kind of once you get into the anti-world, you're there. The yin world, it is just sucking everything in. It has no energy of its own, no light of its own. So that like kind of that pure dark matter, which doesn't exist in our reality, but would exist in the anti-world. So it has that sucking in function. So while it may be tempting, it's not advisable because it follows you throughout eternity. But some people are terribly fascinated with the yin magic and the klipot and the channel of Lucifer and all that. So it's there. It's this dark side, but again, it's the Western description, Western work, because in Judaism it's a little bit different, and there is no exact description of klipot. It's kind of said that it's the anti-tree to the tree of life, the tree of death, but there is no exact nature or picture or specific descriptions of those trees. So more specifics come from Western sources. So it's an approximation. Some people are terribly fascinated with that dark matter. I'm not in particular, so I'm not the biggest expert on this. But the card, the Impress, is used then to tune in to the yin channel, obviously not to the dark matter, but to that yin magic. So, and here you have the red couch, indicative of both the blood mysteries and the fruitfulness and the pregnant woman and the crown and Venus, right, and fruits and bread, kind of the seeds of life, and etc. Now, working with magnetism is actually, as I said, the pathway that is below the yin channel. It's still the central pillar in the tradition that I work with, but it's a work of the 15th arcanum, the devil. So it has the frequency then goes from, if we go from down to up in terms of spiritual evolution, so it goes from Svadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata chakras, so the sacral, the solar plexus, and the heart chakras. That's really where most advanced souls and spiritually interested people spend most of their lives in, working through that particular pathway. So sexuality, attachment, letting go, ego, finances, addictions, that's all of this has to do with this particular pathway represented by the devil. Oddly enough, it's actually not the devil in the Christian idea of the devil. It's Baphomet, but this is the pathway that one works with to increase magnetism. So magnetism is part of feminine magic, and it really is at the core of any attracting practices, and also of obviously feminine practices. It's an alchemical force that arises from uniting polarities, right? And the way it's done in Hermetic Qabalah, it's visualizations, it's contemplation. So working with the card itself, for example, working with fire, with a black stone, which is a grounding force and also representative of the earth, and earth magnetism. Don't forget, earth is magnetic. So we can tune into the earth magnetism. We can tune into the polarity. So female, male, right? And then how to unite them. Fire, horns as a symbol of divine wisdom. And also here under magnetism, we work with high beings, lineages who embody magnetism. So in terms of working with yin magic as opposed to feminine magic, I would say that yin magic is that magic of the black hole, that yin channel, The constricting, there are limited practices that you can do with it, such as tuning into the tuning into the impress card is kind of the beginning, is that at the bottom of the practice, and then going more into the yin channel and working with that dark space. But it's a magic that has potential to destroy, right? It has a strong attractive force, but it has the potential to destroy also. And so it was always kind of guarded and kept secret, just because of the potential to be very destructive, to be because it just sucks everything in, and then it doesn't stop and just keeps sucking everything in, and it starts destroying, because it just starts sucking the energy, and eventually it can also become self-destructive, right? Pure yin, but then in real life it doesn't exist, so you have to practice a little bit to but those yin practices, for example, tuning in to that channel without specific methods or protection, let's say energetic protection, can make you very tired, let's say, and you just want to sleep. Because it starts sucking your energy. Whereas in nowadays, what I know in most Hermetic traditions, yes, there is limited work with the yin channel, but usually not in its pure form, but through feminine magic. So both in terms of magnetism and the yin channel, those higher frequencies, right at the up to the crown. It's more about connecting to high beings, connecting to the feminine. Because feminine magic is, as I said, it's not really a linear structure. It's circles, it's spirals, as opposed to straight lines, right? It's stories and fairy tales, as opposed to scientific articles. It is cycles of creation and destruction. It is dream work. Associations. It is not literal. It has to do with embodiment. Feminine magic has nothing to do with words, because words limit, words give a certain limitation. While at the same time, feminine magic is not the flowing, singing, dancing, throwing flowers into the river and not having any structure at all, as you've seen from the Tree of Life. It's actually the feminine that is structured, that constrains and holds the masculine in its place, gives the masculine the form, the shape, and the boundary. Without that, the masculine, the yang, better say, cannot be, also cannot really be anything, because it has no form. It's that formless, shapeless. So that feminine force, it's the feminine force that is the structure, but it can potentially become a destroyer. So that's where. So then to work with feminine magic in a more kind of human way, a more specific, more concrete way, most choose to work with archetypes, goddesses, holy women, right, witches. So then establishing a direct channel to a goddess, right, or to her egregor. So, for example, working with voodoo goddesses, with old earth goddesses, with Egyptian goddesses, with Hindu goddesses, with Mary Magdalene, with saints like Joan of Arc, for example, or Saint Hildegard, working with the Queen of the Witches, with etc., etc., working with archetypes or fairy tales such as Baba Yaga. And Vasilisa, Baba Yaga is the initiatrix, right, as the crone archetype, and Vasilisa is the maiden, and then the crone initiates the maiden, and the maiden receives everything that she ever wanted through trials, but Baba Yaga is ultimately a good witch, right? Because she's, yes, she constricts, she takes away, but she's good. Again, we see that structure, that constricting force, the one who can destroy, but also give, also gift. Working with archetypes of maid and mother, magician, enchantress, and so on. So for myself then, how do I work with feminine magic? Some work with the yin channel, some practices for attraction, and protection, or, destroying, in terms of destroying negative energies, for example, or curses. That's the yin magic. That's the working with yin. That yin channel, that third pathway, right? I work with energies and archetypes. So goddesses, I prefer to call them energies nowadays. So for example, Aphrodite, right? That love, beauty, abundance, joy, celebration, party, attraction. All the men come running to you. You're wearing an Aphrodite's belt, right? So creating that ritual through visualization. I prefer using visualizations and particular initiations into what is called an egregor, let's say, collective consciousness of a particular tradition or followers, right, of a goddess. I do work with plants and essences, charging water and talismans. Again, that's energetic. Let's say, for example, you are doing meditation or healing work. You can bring a glass of water with you. I'm sure you know water has memory. And at the end of the healing session, even if you do a healing session with me, let's say, bring a glass of water. At the end of the healing session, drink that glass, because it will be charged with the healing energy. Water has memory, right? It does. You can look up that research, where molecules changed shape according to what was said to them. Well, it's exactly the same thing. So that's the simplest way of charging water. It doesn't have to be super complicated. There's no need to go out at midnight, get the blood of the fifth frog that you meet at the crossroads opposite a cemetery under the whatever full moon, looking east. These things also had an importance. They have an importance in terms of locating yourself in time and space. According to the planets and reality, that's everything had a reason. But I'm talking also, sometimes the simple things are also very effective. That's a whole different story of locating ourselves in time and space, but we can charge water simply. Let's say you go to a healing session and you charge water, right? You connect to that. And after the healing session, for example, you can drink that water as an elixir for a few days, or mix it with vinegar or alcohol and have it as an elixir. Drink a few drops every day for 30 days. You can do that. You can bring and charge water at the healing session. So you can, of course, charge water with intention, charge water with prayer. Try it next time you do a healing session or a visualization with me or someone else. Bring a glass of water, and at the end, bless it, drink it, set an intention before the session that you're charging the water, and set an intention after the session. And connecting a lot to the energy. So such as Black Madonna, for example, I visited many Black Madonna shrines or worked with Joan of Arc, etc. Some people are very much more than I am into ritual, altar, sacred items, it's important. And for some people, more important than others. It also depends kind of on your style and which primary energy centers you're working with. Ritual coloring, or sometimes drawing, painting. And neurographics, I worked with it as part of actually a Kabbalah course, sort of, where you draw and then say, for example, you just paint, you randomly draw lines and figures in relation to the situation that you have. And then you state how you want to change the situation, look at the drawing again or painting and change it now according to how you would see it now. And there are some rules like putting triangles, right, or circles, or to cross out an energy. So maybe, to attract, to make stronger, to make weaker, to delete something. So you then fiddle with the drawing according to what you want to change. That can be very powerful. And for some people, again, it's more powerful than for others. But that's actually very interesting work, in terms of ritual coloring and neurographics. Sigils, also, for example, there is a pompagira in voodoo. In voodoo, as you know, most of the deities or spirits, they have their own sigils. Well, they're not called sigils, I believe, but it's like a magical drawing, right? It can be a talisman, an amulet, and it can be also a representation of the deity. So if you draw it, you also attract or create, right? You draw in a certain force. You fix it with a pen and ink, and a little bit of feminine magic, giving shape, giving form. It's less about words and more about drawing, but it's very structural. It has lots of shape. Blood magic, menstrual blood. Again, it's a topic of a PhD, but these are some of the elements that I wanted to talk about. So I think I'll finish it for today. As you can see, there is a lot to explore further, and hopefully we'll look into it with those elements, especially in terms of ritual and drawing and etc., because this can be very fascinating. But for today, thank you so much for listening, and I hope it really helped you maybe, or answered some of your questions, or was a little bit interesting and fascinating. So until next time, I wish you many blessings, all the best.